I didn't interrupt when Ethan Crowell stood up. "You don't work here anymore, and this contract, it never mattered." He tore the pages slowly, deliberately, once, twice, until white strips fell across the conference room carpet. HR went silent. Two managers stared straight ahead, afraid to breathe. "My name is Brandon Hale. I was the senior operations manager, the one who kept the company moving while others collected titles. For 3 years. The systems I built stabilized operations, cut losses, and carried expansion nobody wanted to manage. I wasn't visible. I was effective. Ethan was new, loud, addicted to authority. He liked decisions that sounded final and hated details that argued back. He believed power worked best when exercised publicly. When the paper hit the floor, I didn't argue. I knelt and picked up the pieces, one by one. Ethan laughed. "Look at him," he said, still clinging to paper. I said nothing. Not because I agreed, but because silence denied him an audience. Inside. Shock burned hot, then settled into something heavier. This wasn't a discussion. It was theater. Ethan paced as he talked, explaining his choice like it was strategy. "We need flexibility. You slow things down. Leaders act. Lawyers hide behind documents. Each line landed crooked." I'd seen the emails, his approvals, his late-night instructions that said, "Proceed as agreed." He spoke like the contract never existed, even though he'd followed it every day. I stood, fragments in my hand, and looked at the room. HR avoided my eyes. The managers nodded too quickly. The injustice wasn't the firing. It was how easy it was for everyone to accept it. Ethan gestured toward the door. "We're done here." I slid the torn pages into my bag, not to fix them, not to fight him today. I wanted the tear remembered the witnesses, the confidence, the contempt. He thought destroying paper erased responsibility. As I walked out, his laughter followed me. I didn't turn around. I already understood something Ethan didn't. Actions sign louder than ink. That lesson would unfold faster than anyone in that room expected. Soon enough. That moment hits differently depending on what you've lived through. How did it make you feel angry, quiet, or uncomfortably familiar? If the tension is still sitting with you, try stepping into another room and opening a window for a minute, just to let fresh air change the mood. Where are you listening from right now? If stories like this speak to you, stay with me, subscribe so you don't miss what comes next, because what happened after that meeting was only the beginning. By the next morning, Ethan Crowell had already rewritten the story. An email went out to the entire company before I finished my coffee. It said my departure was due to misalignment with evolving priorities, no mention of results, no mention of 3 years of growth, just a clean sentence that made me sound obsolete, replaceable. HR moved fast. My badge stopped working. My calendar vanished. Access to internal chat was cut without warning, yet, oddly, several operational systems stayed live, reports still generated, approval queues still routed through rules I had written. The company was locking me out while quietly leaning on what I had built. That contradiction pressed on me all day. I kept thinking about how those systems came to exist. I remembered training new managers late into the evening, walking them through workflows nobody wanted to document. I remembered building processes simple enough to survive bad leadership. I remembered Ethan, months earlier, praising my operational discipline in an email copied to the board. He'd written, "This expansion only works because Brandon made it work." Now he was telling everyone I slowed things down. The humiliation wasn't loud. It was procedural, a message, a policy, a quiet removal. I didn't respond. I didn't correct the narrative. I let it sit, heavy and unresolved. Controlled silence felt safer than reactive truth. As the day wore on, Ethan kept performing authority. He led meetings using my frameworks. He quoted metrics I'd defined. He spoke confidently about efficiency, never once saying where the numbers came from. Watching him borrow my work while erasing my name made the pressure rise behind my ribs. Late that afternoon, I opened my archived email folder. I wasn't looking for comfort. I was looking for clarity. That's when I found it. An email from Ethan, sent months earlier, approving an expanded scope of responsibilities beyond my original role. It confirmed additional authority, ongoing obligations, and direct reporting expectations, clear language, no ambiguity. The kind of message executives forget exists once they change their minds. I didn't forward it, I didn't flag it, I printed it, then I printed the metadata, sender, timestamps, server paths, evidence of delivery and acknowledgement. I stacked the pages neatly and set them aside. I finally understood what replaceable really meant to Ethan. It wasn't about my work. It was about control. And for the first time since the meeting, the humiliation tightened into something usable. I didn't feel better yet. I felt sharper. Something had shifted, quietly, without witnesses. If Ethan wanted to erase me with an email, I would answer later with records, patterns, and facts. The company would learn what silence had been holding, for everyone involved. Eventually, I met with lawyer Daniel Mercer in a quiet office that felt deliberately unremarkable, like a place designed to drain emotion before it reached the table. He didn't rush to shake my hand. He didn't ask how I felt. He waited until I sat, then folded his hands and looked at me as if time was negotiable. I started to explain what Ethan Kroll had done. Daniel raised a finger, polite but firm. "We'll get to that," he said. He didn't ask about the contract Ethan tore apart. Instead, he leaned back and asked a question that cut through everything. How long did they act like the contract still existed? The room went still. I thought about it carefully. I told him about the emails, the ones marked urgent and confidential, sent weeks after the meeting. I told him about budget approvals that still required my sign-off, about forecasts routed through my name because the system expected it. I explained how internal tools still treated me as an authority, even after HR revoked my badge. Daniel didn't interrupt. He took notes sparingly, precise, almost surgical. When I mentioned Ethan approving expenditures tied to my expanded responsibilities, Daniel's pen paused. When I described internal documents listing me as a final reviewer, he nodded once, no reaction, just acknowledgement. I felt something shift as I spoke. The anger I'd carried in stopped pressing forward. In its place came order, sequence, cause and effect. Daniel wasn't listening to a story. He was mapping behavior. When I finished, he looked up. His voice stayed even. "They didn't terminate a relationship," he said. "They pretended to." He let that sit, then added the sentence that landed hardest. "We don't need the contract." I stared at him, unsure I'd heard correctly. He explained calmly that repeated actions matter more than a destroyed document. Authority exercised, instructions given, work accepted. All of it left a trail. Ethan's mistake wasn't tearing paper. It was continuing to act as if nothing had changed. Daniel closed his notebook and stood. "From this point forward," he said, "you don't contact them. No replies, no explanations. Silence is protection." He slid his card across the table. "Let them keep talking. We'll keep listening." As I left his office, the weight I'd been carrying didn't disappear. It organized itself. I wasn't calm because things were over. I was calm because control had shifted, quietly, into hands that understood exactly how long memory lasts when records exist. I realized then that patience was no longer passive. It was strategic, deliberate, and cold. Whatever Ethan believed he'd ended was active, visible, and waiting to be counted, line by line, until the silence spoke for itself. Eventually, clearly. I began noticing it the week after I was removed from the building. Despite HR's clean break, the company kept moving along tracks I had laid down. Automated workflows triggered exactly as designed, reports populated on schedule, decisions funneled through logic trees I had written to survive leadership churn. Being locked out didn't erase fingerprints. Emails started arriving, cautiously worded, as if termination were a temporary glitch. A project manager asked whether a regional rollout should pause. Finance requested clarification on a cost threshold. Each message assumed I was still part of the machine. I didn't reply. I archived everything. Then Ethan Crowell reached out directly. His tone had shifted. No bravado, no audience. He called it an urgent transition. He asked if I could walk the team through certain dependencies one last time. He framed it as professional courtesy. I recognized it as reliance. I said nothing. Silence changed the shape of things. The unanswered messages stacked up, revealing how much operational memory lived outside titles. I wasn't needed for ideas. I was needed because systems remembered me. That realization didn't make me smug. It made me steady. Daniel Mercer worked quietly in parallel. He asked for access, not opinions. I forwarded email headers, internal references, approval chains. He pulled system logs showing actions executed under my authority after my dismissal. Meeting calendars confirmed invitations still generated in my name. Nothing dramatic, just behavior continuing as if reality hadn't caught up. The pattern became unmistakable. The company insisted I was gone while acting as if I remained responsible. Ethan approved work tied to scopes he had personally expanded months earlier. He didn't correct the systems. He used them. Late one evening, Daniel forwarded me a single message he'd flagged. It was short. From Ethan, sent after the firing. It read, "Proceed as agreed." That line did more than any torn contract could. It acknowledged continuity, agreement, expectation. I read it twice, then closed my laptop. For the first time, I felt something like quiet confidence settle in. Not excitement, not relief, understanding. They hadn't cut me off. They'd cut themselves open and kept walking. Every step left a mark. I didn't need to intervene. I only needed to let them keep acting, keep documenting, keep assuming I would clean up behind them. I understood then that control doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it waits, patient and precise, while others repeat the same mistake in writing. I stayed invisible on purpose, letting momentum do the work. Each hour added weight. Each decision created another record. Confidence grew without noise. I wasn't winning yet, but I was positioned. Awareness sharpened into advantage. When action finally came, it wouldn't look emotional or rushed. It would look inevitable, documented, and entirely earned. Because systems remember everything long after people forget promises and signatures. Daniel didn't raise his voice when he explained it. He didn't dramatize anything. That was what made it colder. Email is agreement, he said, tapping the table once. Behavior is confirmation. He let the words sit, not as theory, but as record. He walked me through it piece by piece. When Ethan Crowell sent instructions, approved budgets, and assigned authority, he wasn't improvising. He was performing a contract. When the company accepted the work, relied on the outcomes, and kept routing decisions through my systems, they confirmed it. Paper could be torn, conduct could not. That was when I understood the shape of what had happened. Ethan didn't cancel an obligation. He reinforced it. Every confident step he took after firing me tightened the loop around himself. He hadn't erased responsibility. He'd documented it. My phone started reacting before the company did. Calls I didn't answer. Messages that shifted tone by the hour. First, polite, then irritated. Then, careful. We should talk. One text read. Another followed later. This doesn't need to escalate. I didn't respond to any of it. Silence wasn't avoidance anymore. It was alignment. Daniel advised consistency. No engagement, he said. Every unanswered attempt adds clarity. He explained that response invites negotiation, and negotiation muddies timelines. We didn't need noise. We needed contrast. The company's activity against my absence told the story better than testimony ever could. Ethan tried again, a voicemail this time, clipped and tense. He spoke about professionalism, about loose ends, about mutual benefit. He didn't apologize. He circled the issue without naming it. I deleted the message without listening twice. The pressure didn't come from anger. It came from certainty. I knew now that control wasn't about action. It was about restraint, letting others keep proving the same point, in writing, over and over. Daniel sent the letter 2 days later. It was short. No accusations, no threats, 3 paragraphs. It stated facts, referenced dates, and requested preservation of records. Nothing emotional, nothing dramatic. The kind of document that forces silence by design. "Now we wait," Daniel said. I felt no rush of victory, just precision. Ethan's outreach stopped immediately. Internal traffic slowed. Meetings were postponed. The company was suddenly careful, as if realizing too late that volume creates evidence, for the first time since the contract was torn. I felt fully in control, not because I spoke, but because I didn't. Evidence doesn't shout. It accumulates. Quietly, patiently. And when it's finally read aloud, it never sounds like revenge. It sounds like math. I stayed disciplined about it. No checking in, no warnings, no satisfaction texts. Each unanswered call marked time. Each delay sharpened consequences. Control felt less like power and more like balance, maintained by doing nothing unnecessary while others continued proving exactly what they owed without realizing it themselves entirely. I felt the shift before anyone called it panic. Ethan Crowell stopped pretending everything was under control and started reacting to shadows he created himself. His first message arrived angry and unfocused, blaming delays on unfinished handoffs and warning that my silence was damaging the company. A second followed minutes later, sharper, threatening legal action if I didn't cooperate. I didn't respond. The board noticed before I did. Questions surfaced in leadership meetings, the kind that don't sound accusatory until they are repeated. "Where is Brandon's contract?" someone asked. "What governs his authority?" Another voice followed, slower. "Why are we still operating under his approvals?" No one answered cleanly. HR tried. They spoke in policy language, careful and vague, explaining termination procedures without producing documentation. I later learned they searched for the signed agreement and found gaps where certainty should have lived. The silence around that gap grew loud. Ethan reacted the only way he knew how: escalation. He called meetings without agendas, demanded updates that contradicted previous instructions, and blamed confusion on people who weren't in the room. His confidence thinned into irritation. His irritation hardened into confrontation. During one board session, someone pressed again. Did Brandon have a contract? The room paused. Ethan exhaled sharply. "I tore it up," he said. It wasn't valid anymore. He said it like clarification, not confession. The effect was immediate. No one argued. No one defended him. The sentence hung there, heavier than the paper ever was. HR stopped taking notes for a moment, then resumed. The meeting moved on. But something irreversible had happened. Daniel Mercer later obtained the minutes. Ethan's words were there, recorded without emphasis, exactly as spoken. No commentary, no correction, just acknowledgement. A factual entry in a neutral document. When Daniel showed me, he didn't smile. "That's enough," he said simply. The tension I'd been carrying didn't release. It sharpened. The conflict had shifted into open record. Ethan's messages stopped after that meeting. The threats vanished. The tone softened elsewhere. What replaced it was caution. Schedules were delayed, decisions deferred. The company felt like it was holding its breath. I understood then that panic isn't loud forever. It peaks, exposes itself, and collapses inward. Ethan had crossed from control into admission, not to me, but to the people who mattered most. And once a statement enters the record, it stops belonging to the person who said it. It becomes permanent, waiting to be read back when consequences finally arrive. I stayed still through it all, aware that confrontation had done its work without my presence. The board didn't need my voice anymore. They had his. And that realization marked the moment tension tipped into inevitability, where outcomes stop depending on emotion and start following process, precedent, and the quiet gravity of documented truth. Nothing could reverse it now. I knew the balance had shifted when the internal audit request surfaced without warning. It wasn't loud, but it was formal, documented, and unavoidable. The review didn't come from me or my lawyer. It came from compliance. That alone told me control was changing hands. Internal auditors began tracing record retention, approval authority, and termination procedures. What they found wasn't dramatic, just careless. Documents missing where policy required preservation, sign-offs executed outside approved workflow. A termination processed without complete contractual review. Ethan Crowell tried to contain it. He demanded briefings, challenged findings, and questioned the auditor's timing. This is procedural noise, he insisted. But procedure is where power lives. As the review deepened, the board stopped deferring to him. Questions that once went unanswered now required written responses. HR shifted from defending decisions to explaining gaps. Ethan's authority narrowed with each meeting. Then the call came from our largest partner. They announced a temporary pause on transactions pending governance clarity. No accusations, just risk management. The room went quiet. Ethan argued it was overreaction. The board didn't debate. They asked for documentation. Later. Daniel showed me the partner's email. It quoted Ethan's own message to me. Verbatim. Proceed as agreed. Seeing it there changed everything. Power had shifted from confidence to proof. I didn't need to speak. The review was doing that for me. What began as oversight had become consequence. The system was correcting itself, and everyone could feel who no longer controlled it. Meetings changed tone, slower and careful. Emails grew formal, cautious, exact. Decisions paused where Ethan once rushed. The audit calendar filled with follow-ups. Every entry reduced his room to maneuver. I watched from a distance, measured and quiet. The company wasn't collapsing, just rebalancing. That distinction mattered. Process replaced personality. Rules outpaced rhetoric. Ethan tried one last appeal. "We need speed," he said. No one answered. Speed had already cost too much. When authority meets records, records win. I felt the reversal settle, not triumph, but certainty. The review would finish without me. The outcome no longer required my presence. Power had moved to evidence, and it wasn't coming back. That was the moment the scales tipped, quietly, permanently. I closed the file and waited. The next phase was already in motion. Nothing I did now would accelerate it. That restraint was its own kind of leverage. The company had chosen structure over impulse, and that choice favored facts. I stayed invisible, letting governance finish the work. The reversal didn't need spectacle. It needed time, paper trails, and patience. All three were already in place. The rest would follow. I knew that much, enough to wait, enough to watch, enough to let it end. Ethan Crowell called me late, long after his name had stopped appearing on confident emails. The number came through without a title this time, just digits. I let it ring once, then answered. "Brandon," he said. Too quickly. "We need to talk." His voice carried urgency wrapped in something thinner than authority. He didn't wait for agreement. He started explaining. He blamed the audit, the board, the partner pause. He said people had misunderstood his intent. He said silence from me had complicated things. Then the tone shifted. "I gave you opportunities," he said. "You're letting this spiral." It was pleading disguised as accusation. I listened without interrupting. The tension didn't come from anger anymore. It came from proximity. This was the first direct confrontation since the meeting, and he needed something from me. That alone told me how far the balance had moved. "You did this," Ethan said finally. "You triggered all of it," I answered evenly. "I didn't file anything. I just stopped protecting you." There was a pause, not silence, but recalculation. He tried again, slower. He suggested a conversation with the board, a reset, a clean solution. He promised discretion. He didn't promise accountability. I declined without elaboration. "You should speak to your counsel," I said, and ended the call. Minutes later, Daniel Mercer messaged me. One sentence. Emergency board session scheduled. The meeting moved fast. Directors convened remotely. Agendas stripped to essentials. I wasn't invited, and I didn't need to be. The materials spoke. Audit findings, partner correspondence, internal records, Ethan's own statements, now part of the record. What followed wasn't dramatic. It was procedural. Authority is reduced the same way it's granted formally. In writing, the board voted to suspend Ethan's signing power pending review. Temporary, immediate, non-negotiable. Daniel forwarded the notice. I read it once, then again. The words were neutral, almost polite. That was what made them final. Ethan tried calling again. I didn't answer. The confrontation had passed without shouting, without threats, without spectacle. He'd wanted a fight. What he got was removal. The system didn't argue with him. It reclassified him. I felt the pressure ease, replaced by clarity. This wasn't revenge. It was exposure. Ethan hadn't been undone by action, but by absence. The moment I stepped back, the structure he leaned on collapsed inward. I sat with that realization, steady and alert. The board hadn't finished yet, neither had the process. But the hardest moment was over. Power had shifted into rooms I didn't need to enter. All I had done was refuse to intervene. And that refusal had spoken louder than anything I could have said. The board meeting happened without me, exactly the way Daniel said it would. I stayed home, phone face down, letting distance do its work. Justice doesn't need witnesses. It needs records, procedures, and people willing to follow them. The vote was scheduled as a special session, limited agenda, no debate theatrics. Ethan Crowell joined confident enough to believe momentum could still save him. He argued first. He reframed timelines, blamed communication failures, accused others of overreacting. When that didn't land, his voice tightened. "You're destroying the company over paperwork," he said. No one interrupted. Directors asked questions instead, short ones, documented ones. They referenced audit findings, partner correspondence, and the termination process that never closed properly. Each answer narrowed Ethan's options. Each pause made the outcome clearer. When the vote was called, it was procedural, removal for cause, effective immediately, no raised voices, no moral speeches, just hands, counts, confirmation. Ethan protested, called it unfair, called it personal. Someone reminded him the decision was administrative, not emotional. The word administrative ended the argument. I learned later that he stood when it was over, stunned more than angry. He asked for time. None was granted. Security was notified quietly. HR followed policy carefully this time. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Ethan left the building carrying nothing. No statements, no entourage, no exit speech, just silence, which suited the moment better than applause ever could. Justice doesn't announce itself. It closes files from a distance. I imagined the room resetting itself after he left. Chairs shifting back, laptops closing, directors exhaling. The crisis wasn't dramatic anymore. It was resolved. What remained was governance, repair, and the slow work of restoring trust that noise had damaged. Daniel called me after the vote. "It's done," he said. Then he added something unexpected. The board had discussed continuity, stability, repair. They wanted experience without ego. They wanted systems that worked. They wanted me back. The offer came formally an hour later. Different title, clear authority, direct reporting to the board, safeguards written in plain language. Nothing dramatic, just respect, finally codified. I didn't answer immediately. Cold justice isn't rushed. I read the terms, checked the structure, confirmed protections. Then I accepted. I never returned to collect old things. I didn't need to. What mattered wasn't reclaiming space, but redefining it. Ethan's departure closed one chapter. My return opened another, quieter one. Power had shifted without spectacle. No revenge scenes, no victory laps, just process correcting itself. That was the satisfaction. Watching a system choose integrity over impulse. And knowing my absence made that possible. Justice arrived exactly as it should have. Calm, documented, final. Nothing more was required, and nothing less would have been enough for it to hold. Endure scrutiny, and remain unquestioned long after emotions faded. That was the measure of closure. I signed the new agreement in silence, not because it lacked weight, but because it finally had clarity. The paper was clean, the language plain, the authority defined without ego. No raised voices, no hidden clauses, just responsibility placed where it belonged. I didn't feel the need to smile or savor the moment. Satisfaction arrived quietly, like a system returning to stable operation after unnecessary noise. The board didn't ask for theatrics. They asked for continuity, accountability, and restraint. I agreed to all three. The title was different this time. The reporting line was different too. Direct, transparent, documented. Safeguards sat in the open, not buried in legal flourishes. I read every line once, then again, not searching for leverage, but confirming alignment. When I signed, it wasn't victory. It was closure. No one mentioned Ethan Crowell during the meeting. There was no need. His absence explained everything more clearly than commentary ever could. The company had moved past personality and back into structure. That was the real correction. I returned without ceremony. I didn't reclaim an office or revisit old routines. I focused on repairing what had been stressed by impulse. Processes tightened, records standardized, authority redistributed to reduce risk instead of amplifying it. The work felt familiar, but lighter. The weight of uncertainty was gone. What surprised me most was how little anger remained. I didn't need it anymore. Anger is useful for motion, not for maintenance. What endured was understanding, the kind that comes from watching a system fail, then fix itself. The contract I signed mattered less than the behavior that followed it. That lesson stayed with me. Paper records intention, but actions reveal truth. I didn't need to prove anything again. The trail already existed. As the days settled, I realized this wasn't about winning or losing. It was about accountability, outlasting emotion, about restraint proving stronger than reaction, about silence doing the work noise never could. That understanding closed the chapter cleanly, without bitterness, spectacle, or the need for explanation public. He thought tearing paper erased responsibility. Turns out, actions sign louder than ink. I felt anger, humiliation, and doubt, but I learned that staying steady mattered more than being loud. Justice didn't arrive with applause. It arrived quietly. The moment accountability outlasted ego. If you're still here with me, I'm glad you stayed to the end. After listening to a heavy story like this, do yourself one small kindness, step away from your screen for a few minutes, and write down one thing that gave you strength this week. It helps more than you think. Where are you listening from right now if this story resonated? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your experiences matter. And if stories about dignity, resilience, and quiet justice speak to you, a like, a share, and a subscription help this channel grow so more stories like this can find the people who need them.